So this week on Crowdfunding Nerds, we talk about TCGs and if they're dying and how they're doing. We talk about scalping with TCGs, grading and formats and distribution, and what can be done, leveraging IPs with your product, and how to market a new TCG, and lots more. Let's get into it.
Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Hero Time Manufacturing. That is Hero Time, the numeral1.com. Hirsch Gleck has been a regular on our podcast. We highly recommend his services. He is a man of integrity. Hero Time, they can make anything. They've got competitive pricing and they even do game prototypes. So make sure to check out Hero Time, numeral1.com. A link is in the show notes. And if you use the code Crowdfunding Nerds 101, you can get a 3% discount on your production through them. Let's get back into the episode.
Game begin.
Let's go.
Or the Alliance.
Amazing.
Well, welcome everyone to another exciting episode of the Crowdfunding Nerds. And today, Andrew's not with us. He's on vacation, enjoying sunny California. But I am joined today by Jacob and Donnie of the Crowdfunding Nerds team. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Well, we are here to discuss the, I don't know what words to use, but maybe the phenomenon of the trading card game environment in 2025. For those who don't know, there's a lot of stuff happening within the trading card game environment, and we just want to share our thoughts and then also maybe present some solutions to people who are seeking to maybe either market or develop a trading card game, and maybe give you something to think about as we are seeing sort of trends in the environment. So maybe first of all, we could kind of, I don't know if you guys want to open up with what's your experience with trading card games? What was like your first trading card game you played, and do you still play them? And let's go from there. So I don't know who wants to go first.
Sure, yeah, I can go first. I've got a pretty decent experience with TCGs, or background with TCGs. When I was a kid, I was a sports card collector when Pokémon first came onto the scene. And there were some kids in my neighborhood that bought and traded cards. And so I kind of collected and just to have cards. I didn't do anything super intense. I wasn't a player, but I did have some of the cards. And then I got more into the actual field of playing games. I was a high school teacher for 5 years, and it was in a bit of a time when Magic had sort of had its big resurgence. And we had tons of high school kids at the school I was teaching at that were playing. And just to build relationships with the kids and kind of create an environment for them at the school that was safe, or that they felt seen, I used to have my planning period open, that if students were on study hall, they could come into my class and hang out and play Magic. Or if they wanted to come after school, I kept after school hours just to offer help with the subject that I was teaching. But if students wanted to come in after school and play Magic, that space was theirs. And through creating that kind of space, I had a bunch of kids that were coming up to me like, "Oh, Mr. Cecil, when are you going to start playing Magic? And oh, if we build you a deck, will you play with us?" And so I kind of indulged and was like, "Yeah, sure. If you want to bring in a deck, I'll learn the game and I'll play." And so I started playing Magic while I was a high school teacher, just as a casual way to engage and play with the kids that were hanging out in my room anyway. And I had some other buddies at the time that played. I had a cousin that was in the competitive scene for a while. And so I kind of stayed engaged for a bit. And then after I left my teaching position, I took over a job managing a local game store. And we were a host spot for Magic events, Yu-Gi-Oh events, and Pokemon events. And so I kind of got to learn a bit about the differences between those three, which at the time were probably the three biggest trading card games. Learned the difference of, how they handled their cards and their releases, their play formats, and kind of stayed engaged with that. And then I kind of lost touch for a bit with it after I left that position until my kids, I've got 3 kids that are 5 through 10, and they've all kind of recently jumped back into wanting to collect Pokemon cards. They've kind of caught the craze too. But they're strictly like want to play. They could care less about what the card looks like. My 5-year-old only cares how much damage characters do, so it doesn't matter what it is. He just wants to do the biggest damage numbers that he can. And so they're actively playing. And so that's kind of brought me in. I actually had not played Pokemon myself until they started. So I currently am playing Pokemon a bit now, just to do that with my kids.
Cool. Thanks, Jacob. I know you've got a lot of experience. Donnie, what about yourself?
Yeah, I've been playing TCGs on and off since I was a kid. So I first picked up Magic when fourth edition came out. I was doing theater and there was a guy there that played, said, "Hey, go get a starter deck and I'll teach you the game." And so I learned that. But prior to that, I was collecting sports cards, but mainly like the Marvel cards. Those were the things I really were into. And so when Magic started coming around, it's like, oh, you can actually play a game with these. Like, okay, cool. And I remember like Overpowered coming out, but I didn't get into Overpowered, the Marvel trading card game, because I didn't like the art as well as like the Marvel masterpieces that I was collecting. I was like, oh, I don't really want to look at this card. It's not that great. Then got into Pokemon when Pokemon came out. I actually had a bunch of the first edition stuff and never played the game. So again, like similar to that, to like Jacob, like I didn't play it. I just kind of had them, and like it's like, oh, because I liked the show and just buy the cards. And then a friend of mine, like we kept just buying the cards. Like, oh, this is like collecting the Marvel cards, but I'm collecting my favorite Pokemon. Like, there you go. That makes sense. That was an easy transition. Years later, through high school and stuff, didn't really play at all until college, where a friend of mine said, "Oh yeah, I played Magic all the time," and so I pulled out all my old cards that I'd bought from like Ice Age and Fourth Edition and all that, which I was just buying them, and so we started playing again then. And then Versus System came out, which was the Marvel versus DC trading card game, which I could argue is still superior, but I'm not going to do that today. But so got really into that. Dabbled in like the World of Warcraft card game they had. There was a Warhammer one I remember playing a little bit with. A buddy of mine bought a bunch of cards for inexpensive, and so we would play around with that. And then more recently, when I had kids, my kids got really into the Pokemon cartoon and stuff. So I was like, well, let me teach you the game. And so we started playing more and more. And so we have a bunch of Pokemon cards, been playing that we were playing it for about 6 or 7 years. We haven't played recently because my oldest son, recently we got into Magic. So with the Bloomborough set, I'm like, okay, this is a theme that appeals to me. And then I told my son about the Lord of the Rings Magic set. I'm like, okay, we're in. So we're just doing that. And recently, actually within the last month, we just bought a starter deck for Star Wars Unlimited to give that a shot. So that's kind of my history of trading card games. My favorite game of all time is the Lord of the Rings LCG. So I'm excited to talk about that and how that works as well. So
cool. Well, I'm probably the least experienced out of you lot. So I obviously got into the Pokemon trading card game as a child when I was like 9 or 10. But I had no one to play with. So I had the cards, I had the decks, and I knew how to play, but I had no one to play with. So I just spent my time looking at them, I suppose. I did have the trading card game on Game Boy, so I did learn how to play, and I was able to play kind of digitally. But only when I was a bit older, I think I was about 13, someone in my friend group also had the cards, and then we were able to play. But he was a big cheat because if you know in Pokemon, you have the prize cards and you kind of put them down. Well, and I sort of valued my cards. I didn't want them to be damaged, so I looked after them. But he didn't, so he would purposely bend his cards or like tear his cards, like like an important card. So if it was a prize card, he would know what it is. Like, you're a big cheat. And because I had no one else to play with, basically was playing against this cheater who, if he had like a powerful Pokemon as a prize card, he knew what it was able to pick it up, and it's a huge advantage. And I wasn't willing to, damage my cards. So then I put Pokemon away. I had a couple of decks, and I actually gave all my cards away when I became like a teenager. I just kind of passed them on to a friend who liked Pokemon, so no longer have them. But now I'm at a stage where my children are. So I'm probably like the perfect demographic for the current Pokemon market, because they can kind of bait me with all the nostalgia of when I was a kid, and then I can introduce it to my children. So now my kids are getting into it, and we have kind of gone like gun ho into it. But I've been kind of very strategic in how I've introduced them to it. So I intentionally don't allow them to open booster packs, because to be frank, it's a form of gambling, and I don't want them to develop a gambling addiction. It's particularly when there's monetary value to be associated with certain cards, then it is literally a slot machine, and this is not something I want my kids to be accustomed to. So we only buy singles, and we've kind of the way I've gone about purchasing it is that I've almost done it like you would a living card game where you build specific decks and you kind of make them balanced within each other. So my goal hasn't been to get the most powerful cards, it's just to get cards that Pokemon I think are interesting. They're kind of hopping back to my nostalgia. And usually those are quite cheap because nobody wants them because they're not viable competitively. And so I found that's a great way to kind of get into the hobby in a way that's a bit more cost effective. And then I can avoid maybe some of the negatives, which I don't like about the hobby in terms of the collecting, the price valuation, and all those other things. But as of late, it's been pretty difficult to get your hands on Pokemon because of a thing known as scalping. So, Jacob, maybe could you talk to us about some of your experience with managing a friendly local game store? Has scalping always been a problem? Was it something that you had to, face when you worked in a store like that? And also maybe
how
just
long
define
have you
what
been
scalping
scalping?
is. And also just define what scalping is. If people aren't familiar with that term, then
Sure.
be up to speed.
Yeah, I would say, I guess just to define scalping, most of the scalping stuff relates to the practice of buying up all of a product, usually because there is a high desire for something within that product. Obviously, we're talking about TCGs, so there are certain cards that are definitely more valuable or more trendy than others. And so scalpers tend to be the ones that are buying up all of the product, and then they're reselling it at a premium because they know that demand is there for that particular item. As for like my experience when I was running a game store, we did not have huge issues with scalpers. I think that is something that's definitely become a bigger issue, more so with Pokemon, in the last probably 5+ years. And there's part of that is I think Pokemon itself has had a pretty big resurgence. It's just one of those things that sometimes games come in waves, and they'll drop out of the limelight for a little bit, and then it just takes something. Whether it's influencers start playing it, or there's a new show, or nostalgia, and then it comes back into the limelight. There's a big demand again. So I think one of the things that with Pokemon is they have kind of gone the route of including special illustration cards and chase variants. So you'll have a full base set of cards, but within that you'll have these special full art, special illustration versions of particular cards within the set. And they're obviously inserted into packs at a much higher rarity, and therefore have a much higher value on the secondary market. With the current stuff right now, I know it's been kind of bonkers. We had talked a little bit pre-reel. The newest Pokemon set, Destined Rivals, is definitely one that is kind of geared towards the millennials or those that have been playing since they were kids. As there are a lot of cards within the set that are from the Kanto region, or they feature Kanto region trainers like Misty. It's a big emphasis on Team Rocket. And I know for a fact within the set, so the most desired card, there's a special chase variant of full illustration variant of Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket. There's a Giovanni's Mewtwo, and that card ungraded, I think right now on TCG Player is running a resale value of almost $400. If it is graded PSA 10, I think the projected PSA 10 value of that card is closer to $1,500. So you take the thing that at its essence is meant to be a booster pack with a $499 MSRP, and you roll the dice and you may get lucky and hit a $1,500 card. That's a massive markup. So you have a lot of scalpers that are buying up full boxes of all of this product, and then they're either selling the full boxes to people at a markup,
or opening them.
Yeah, or they're opening packs and then selling individual cards. So it has definitely become something that is a bigger deal with Pokemon. I don't know if we want to talk about. Do you want to should we talk about the differences between some of the TCGs and how they're handling this? Because I do think scalping is definitely more of an issue with Pokemon, although it's not exclusive. There is still some scalping that's involved with Magic, but it's due to a difference in their format.
Hey, crowdfunding nerds, if you're looking for an awesome fulfillment partner for US shipping, you should really consider Bridge Distribution and Fulfillment. I personally use them. I've used them for multiple projects. They do such a great job. They also can fulfill Amazon orders and get you prepped for Amazon and their warehousing team. I have been so happy using Bridge Distribution. I'm really proud that they're sponsoring us. If you reach out, bridgedist.com, that's bridgedist.com, let them know we sent you. All right, now back to the show.
Yeah, I think we certainly can switch to that soon, but maybe I could get Donnie's thoughts on the idea of trading cards as an investment. I think it's not like the 90s, right, where there's like, these are just little pieces of cardboard. I think people now intrinsically know that these cards, for whatever reason, can accrue value over time, and they've become an investment vehicle. And I think this is where a lot of the kind of problems have arisen, is because these aren't cute little toys anymore. These are now a mechanism which people can generate a return. So, Donnie, do you want to speak into that? Where they,
Absolutely.
There's always been collectors, right? But there seems to be of another level of intensity and almost like another level of viciousness in terms of the kind of how grabby and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Enthusiastic, I suppose, these scalpers can be.
Intense, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do want to talk to that, because I just remembered the reason why I even got into collecting cards in the first place was a friend of the family was into collecting sports cards, because we tend to forget that the trading card game came out because there were trading cards, right? So collecting cards isn't a new thing. Our parents' generation were doing that. I mean, even you look at old Charlie Brown Peanuts comics and they're collecting cards, like back in the 50s. Like, this isn't a new thing at all. So it's interesting to think about that. It's like there were certain rarities within that. There were cards, if I recall, there weren't necessarily rarities. There were like specific cards you wanted based on the players on how they were playing. Like I remember, I forgot his name. A real famous Dodger catcher. I just forgot his name, but I remember like his cards were hot. Like when you'd go in and try to find his rookie cards, his first year he played, those were the ones that were going to be hot. But it was all contingent on the players themselves, on how well they played, how popular they were. And there would be some variance in there. But again, all that translated over to Magic when Magic first started coming onto the scene as well. So speaking to collectors, the first thing I thought of was even toys. Like even today, you can go to a store. If you try to find like the most popular character in whatever franchise, they're most of the time off the shelf because collectors have already come in, bought them all off the shelf and keeping them in their package. Pixar did a whole movie on that called Toy Story 2, so like this sort of trend isn't new when it comes to Pokemon and Magic the Gathering and stuff. When they first came out, they were still novelties, like you said. But then people started to see like, oh, wait a minute, there's a built-in rarity because they're going to stop printing these. Like another sort of thing that's really popular right now. Legos are the same way. Legos have the same problem where it's people will come in and buy them all and then wait for them to no longer be printed by Lego and then go turn around and resell them. There was actually a point where Legos were actually valued more per ounce than gold was at some point during the pandemic. So like an ounce of Legos was actually, depending on the set, was worth more than the same weight in gold. I might be a little off on that, but I do remember there was a moment, I think in 2023, where that was the case. I don't think that's the case anymore, but it may still be.
Forbes magazine did an article on that point, that Legos were considered a better investment than gold.
Thank you. That's what I was driving at. So we tend to forget that. And so when it comes to like third-party markets, when it comes to these trading card games, they're trying to stay viable because at the end of the day, they're trying to make money, right? And one of the things I see trending away from like the third-party market is their digital platforms. So even Lorcana announced recently that they're going to be doing a digital platform. Magic has one. Pokemon just came out with their brand new one. Yu-Gi-Oh has one. So now they're kind of able to control where the money's going, right? So the downside to that, it's like, okay, how's that going to affect, local game stores, for one, because Magic and trading card games are kind of their lifeblood. For the most part, they're not selling, multiple copies of, Dungeons and Dragons player manual. They're selling multiple boxes of Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, or it's not even the same, and then board games are the same way. People aren't coming in buying $300 worth of board games. They're buying $300 worth of cards, So yeah, going back to, prior to Magic the Gathering, like they were investments. They were buying boxes of sports cards. They were buying boxes of Skybox and Marvel cards. And so that trend has just kind of kept going. And I think what succeeded with Magic is like, okay, we can play that same game. We can, it's a natural progression. People are already collecting cards. It's like, why can't we make a game out of that? And that was the kind of the secret to their success, right? So with that, it's like, okay, collecting those cards is like, it still becomes an investment because they don't keep printing the sets. And that's what it comes down to. It's like, because they can't, and a lot of times they just can't do it. They literally have 100,000 different cards in their game. Like, how are they, there's no way they could keep printing those sets. So there is kind of a natural scarcity. And because there's a scarcity, that's going to drive collectors to it automatically. And then they built that in with different rarities, because I'm pretty sure it was Pokemon that actually brought in the mythic rares. Because if I recall, Magic didn't have mythic rares originally. There was something that was brought in later on where it's like, oh, they brought in this new rarity. But then even in like China and Japan, they have like 6 or 7 different rarities in a lot of the card games that they play, where it's not just, common, uncommon, rare, mythic rare. It's like epic rare, like legendary rare. Like they go way, way, way up, and it all depends on the art a lot of the times. So as far as that goes, I mean, like, collecting isn't a new thing, but I think that's what keeps it as an investment, is that it has a built-in scarcity. Legos are the same way. They can't keep printing the same sets. So they have to eventually stop. So because of that, there's a built-in need to collect, or there's a built-in incentive to collect, if that makes sense.
I think another thing that maybe hinders the Pokemon company is the nostalgia marketing. I think you can almost predict the waves, because right now we're seeing that people who grew up with Pokemon are now at the stage where they're having their own children, or they have enough income to invest in Pokemon cards, and they can then, leverage all the nostalgia of that time period and market towards them. We've seen this with sets such as the 151, which is the original Kanto Pokemon, and even Destined Rivals. Again, as Jacob, you said, they're kind of leveraging this. So I think they understand that there's going to be these cycles of peaks. And then you also have kind of phenomenons like Pokemon Go was super popular, and that sparked a whole new wave of interest into the Pokemon IP, which then obviously boosted the sales of the trading cards as well. Jacob, do you want to talk a little bit about how Magic deals with the difference between collectors and players? I know they have a system that kind of augments a lot of the problems that we're seeing in Pokemon right now.
For sure. Yeah, I think the way you approach the format it can be very beneficial, or it can add to the problem. And so if we're looking at those big two, like if we're looking at Pokemon and we're looking at Magic, I do think that both companies have handled this idea of collectability and scarcity and the desire to scalp something very differently. So Magic has, and this is where I know that I didn't notice this when I was running a stores, because this wasn't a thing until relatively recently, especially as Magic has started to produce new blocks or booster sets based on popular IPs. So I know they've already done Lord of the Rings, and they've done Warhammer, and Final Fantasy is the current new one. And so they're snatching up a lot of these big IPs and doing these specialty sets. But with the rise of these specialty sets, they decided to create a new way to sell their product. So it's no longer like it used to be, where it was just booster packs. If you wanted to go buy Magic, the newest set was out, there was just a booster pack. The only other options you have were to buy a fat pack, which was just a collection of multiple boosters, or you bought a box. But either way, the packs were the same. They were all just booster packs. And within those
They
packs,
did have starter decks at some point.
They did have, yes, they did still have starter decks, but I meant more from the standpoint of like if you were hunting for a card, it was just the booster pack was the only option that you had. And you could pick up any of the card in the set that way. What they decided to start doing, and this may be in relation again, is like Pokemon has kind of continued to create these extra rarities. Magic has decided in response to like where Pokemon has special illustrations, Magic also has special illustration cards, but they've segmented those out into a new booster pack. So now they actually, I think, have 3 different booster pack formats. There's your still traditional booster pack. They make draft booster packs, which are geared more towards the format of playing a draft. And then they have what are called collector packs. And what they've chosen to do is those collector packs, that is your only chance to pull these special illustration cards. So, for example, the Lord of the Rings set, they made a huge deal about there was going to be a one ring card. And there was this kind of like big hunt to try to get this card. And it was pulled. And then you had people on the secondary market. Like I said, I think Post Malone is currently the owner of it, or at least he was the first one to rebuy it. And I think he paid over $1 million for that card. So there was this massive hunt.
Tolkien is rolling in his grave. That's what he's doing. The whole point of the freaking books is about the love of gold, the love of money.
I can only imagine Tolkien sitting at a signing with Post Malone holding a One Ring card. But
he needs to go to a volcano and throw it in. He's got to let it go.
Into the fire, yeah.
That would have definitely been the most meta way to handle that, which would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to get back to the point, there was a One Ring that was only available in the collector's packs. It didn't mean that there wasn't a One Ring card that you could have to play in the game. It was available in a booster pack. You could get it in a booster pack, but the art is different. And there's obviously thousands of them. So the secondary market was not super hot on the basic art One Ring. Obviously, everyone wants that one of one. And so people were snagging up these collector booster packs. Those packs tend to sell for more. The MSRP on them is higher. And then I have seen with Magic, that is more where you get some of the scalpers coming in because they're buying those up if you can find them and then marking them up if there's a high demand for particular cards within that set. Where I do think that has been beneficial for Magic is, as Donnie kind of said, we've always had this idea or this tradition of collecting. And the trading card game came out because we had trading cards. So in essence, I think what Magic has done to address the issue is they have created collector packs, which are basically just trading cards. And then they have regular booster packs, which is a trading card game. Now, I know the cards functionally are the same as according to the text, but people aren't buying collector packs to build a deck out of those cards unless you just want to show off that you spent a ton of money and you want to bling out a deck for a tournament or whatever. Most of the people that are buying those collector cards are only hunting for a copy of them to have, or they're hunting for them to resell them. Whereas the booster packs, because everything is still available booster pack, if you want to play the game, if you like the ability of the card, you have the ability to track it down, and it's really not that ridiculous. So I think in that way, that's where Magic has stayed ahead of the curve a bit. And I will say that it's usually not an issue for me to walk into a store if I wanted to buy Magic cards and find Magic booster packs on a shelf. And if I find them, they're MSRP. Pokemon, I think this is where it's becoming a bigger issue, is because the game still only has the one booster pack format. You can buy your intro decks and stuff, which is fine. And maybe that's their way. Like if you want to play, this is how you get into play. But I think the problem that Pokemon is going to run into, or that may rear its head sooner or later, is that the game is still generally marketed to a younger player base. So Magic, at least in my experience, when we would have tournaments at the store, you have some younger Magic players, but I would say that the bulk of our Magic players were over the age of 18. We had some high schoolers, but most of them were people that were in college or they were post college. We had a lot of adults that was just their way to blow off steam. We had a couple like news anchors and school teachers, lawyers, insurance salesmen. And that's how they blew off steam, is they'd come in and play draft format for Magic the Gathering. So you had a lot older player base. Whereas when we had Pokemon League on Sundays, those player bases are all usually preteens and younger. I would say the bulk of your player base is probably between 8 and 12 that were showing up for league play. So you have a card game that is primarily marketed to be played by younger kids. It's not that there's not older people that are playing, but the nature of the game is geared more towards young children. So there is a beauty in that, hey, we just have booster packs. It's the only way to get it. It makes it easier for kids to decide how they want to spend their money. The problem is they don't have anything to spend money on, because everything, all of these special illustration rares and chase rares and double mythics are all only in those packs. So you have scalpers and people that are looking at them as an investment, snatching all this product up, and then you have kids that can't play the game. And I think that creates a real problem that they may run into as far as damaging your player base, is because how do you expect to grow your player base if your player base can't access your product? And so I think that's kind of been interesting to look at two different ways to handle it. I do think it's possible to appeal to the collector and to the person that wants to play, but it's going to require a bit of a change to the format and how you choose to release your product into the mainstream market.
I agree. I think if Pokemon doesn't course correct, then this could be the death of TCGs. We're also seeing the same thing happening in Magic now with the Final Fantasy. It's selling at all-time highs for a very similar reason. And investments are only investments if they retain their value. And if people stop valuing them, then they have no value. So if people are not playing the game, they don't see these as valuable, as desirable, then you won't be able to sell it on later on. That's the reality. People won't have the same. And another thing is also the association. Like, do you really want your brand to be associated with kind of money hungry investments and these kind of sharks going after, blood in the water? It's not a good look. And it's not something I think parents will want their children to be associated with. And that might just be cause for people just to step back. So I think there's long-term ramifications to this. Like, why is gold seen as secure investment? Well, it retains its value because it doesn't corrode, it's not corrosive, and then it's hard to possess. You can't just conjure gold like some alchemist out of lead. It's actually very difficult to kind of mine out of the ground. It takes a lot of equipment, so it's not something that can be replicated easily, and this is why it retains its value so well. It's the same with these Pokemon cards. If people stop prizing them and valuing them because the nostalgia is gone, everyone's moved on, people aren't playing the game anymore, well, those investments aren't going to mean very much. So I do kind of see this as like the beginning of the end of trading card games. And maybe one of you could speak into the kind of, I think I see a problem with how distribution is done. I think distribution is a legacy way of getting products to customers. It worked well in the past. In fact, Donnie, you sent me a list from Wikipedia of all the trading card games listed in the world, ones that are in print, out of print. And what I did is I compiled that list because it tells you the publication date when they first launched. I compiled that all of them there, and there's hundreds. And the top 10 in terms of years when they were published. So the most popular year for publishing trading card games was 2004. 20 different games were published in 2004. Other than that, it was 1995, 2005, 2000, 2007, 2003, 2014, 97, 2001, 1999. So basically the late 90s and early noughties is when a lot of these games, this was kind of the kind of craze, a lot of these new games were being published. And if you look at it now, there's very few trading card games being published. And I think it's because of this phenomenon. It's very competitive, hard to get into. So if anyone listening is thinking of developing a trading card game, don't. I think that's probably my explanation. It's not the best way to go in. I think living card games is a far better way to do this.
I
But
think.
Yeah,
Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
I was talking to my family last night, and it was one of those things of like, okay, what if I want to make a sports shoe brand. It's like, okay, I'm going to make a really good sports shoe brand. It's like, okay, like you have to understand you're up against giants if I was going to do that. And creating a TCG is similar in that regard as well. It's like, okay, if you're going to make a TCG, one, it's really difficult because it's not just making a game. It's kind of similar to the MMO craze when that happened. Everyone was making an MMO, but then they forgot, like, oh, it's really easy to make one. It's difficult to maintain one. Like that was the problem with MMOs, and trading card games are the same way. It's like it's real easy to come up with like maybe 3 sets, but then when you're 3 years in and you're running out of ideas and it's just you and like 3 other people, that's going to taper off real hard. And I think this is where, going into what you were saying, Sean, with like LCGs, this is where the LCG model really fits well.
yeah, so for those who don't know, those are living card games, and I suppose you just buy one big box, almost like a board game. You buy a big box, and that comes with your certain decks, and
Yeah.
you're then able to play the game. And I think that's a far better way. And one
Yeah,
way I've kind of done that with the Pokemon game, because I've built decks based on types, and then we've kind of just used those as a family, and we modify and tweak them. So I've kind of transformed the trading card game into a living card game, which I think is an interesting way to kind of go about. And I have no desire to get more. So at this point, it's like pretty happy with what we have.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty, I guess, to kind of play on that. I think that's where Magic is maybe a little bit better set up, is that they support multiple formats for their cards. So there are multiple different ways that you can play the game. If you want to stay invested in standard, you only play the most recent block rotation. Then you have the opportunity to play modern, which has another more expanded section of cards that you can use, or legacy, which is an even bigger set of cards that you can play around and use. And then they also support a lot of other kind of fan made or formats. So I know like Commander is now like an official format release where you only have to you play with a 100 card deck instead of a 60 card deck. And instead of being able to have 4 of a certain card, you only play with 1 copy of each card that's in the deck. So it makes it a lot easier to get into, because you're not having to hunt down multiples of certain cards in order to be super competitive. You only need 1 of each card. Or we had people that would come in and play. There's a small format. I guess it's technically not officially supported, although I have seen tournaments for it at gaming conventions where they play pauper format. And pauper format, you can't use anything over an uncommon rarity. You can only play with commons and uncommons. And so I think the beauty of Magic being able to have a little bit of longevity is there are at least multiple ways that the cards can be used. And so I think it's a difficult thing to break into, because I think in order for those things to develop, you kind of have to have an initial set of popularity. If people don't like your initial run, they're not going to start building their own fan-made formats to keep the game going.
Or if they can't get the cards.
Right,
like
yeah,
in the
exactly.
stage of Pokemon.
But if you can get to that point where you have at least a desire to play, and when you're designing cards, there are definitely certain cards that come out in sets that players would come into our shop and say, this card is not good if you want to play it in standard format, but this is a great card for Commander. And so it's kind of neat to see that even, I think, within their own internal design, you do have some cards that are designed with other formats in mind, and that does give yourself a bit more longevity to your franchise or your IP, I guess.
So let's talk about distribution then, because I know of like Pokemon distributors who will purposely buy sets that are not selling. And the reason is because they want to stay in the good books of their distributor, so that when the hot stuff does start landing, they are sort of top of the pile in terms of getting access to that product. And then the sets that they can't sell, they can actually donate to charities, for 501c3 kind of charities. And then they can write them off as a tax expense. So that is a way that they kind of work around kind of maintaining good relationships with distributors. I think this is part of the problem, because this kind of distributor model creates this artificial scarcity. And that's why there's people who are just scalping and being able to sell, is because the reality is it's difficult for people to get these products. And I think the solution to the kind of distributor artificial scarcity model is to do pre-orders. So if the Pokemon company, for example, just on their website didn't sell, because they do sell on their website, but the stuff goes instantly because bots, purchase it. But if they just did like a pre, so that, I know they just released the Destined Rivals set, but before they released that, they just did a pre-order for a month, saying, "Hey," then anyone who wanted that would have already ordered it, and would receive it. So you would have kind of satisfied the demand for it, and they as a company would have made way more money because there's a higher markup of doing direct sales. So I don't understand why they haven't applied this model. And this is the crowdfunding model, right? This is exactly what we do with crowdfunding. It's essentially like a pre-order. Like before you go to manufacturing, you know exactly how many people want this thing. You could print that amount, maybe a bit more to sell afterwards, but it's far less risky in terms of oversupplying. You could actually meet the actual needs. So I see crowdfunding as a real valuable way to distribute products to people. I suppose that's where it comes down to the importance of having your own audience and building that audience so that you can have this direct sales distribution and you're not so dependent on third parties getting your product into the hands of others.
Yeah, I would agree. Because I see a lot, I don't want to name drop names of businesses, because I do have a friend that's in the business of selling Pokemon cards and buying from a distributor. But I have had those conversations with him, and I've had conversations with other local game store owners when it comes to trying to acquire product. That is definitely a practice, is to buy even if there's not a desire on it, because it does boost up your allocation with a distributor, and you get a bit of a first priority when it comes towards getting a product. So I know with my friend's business, they made that move very early on, that they were buying whatever was offered to them. So if it was like, "Hey, we have 15 pallets of this that are available, do you want them?" and he would take them. And it wasn't necessarily because they were super desirable, but that's the product that was there. So now whenever new sets come out, he kind of gets first crack at a lot of it and is able to sort of order and get what is allocated to them, or their allocation is much higher with the distributor than it is for some of the other local game stores. Because I know that there's a couple in my, we've probably got 5 local game stores in Lexington. The 2 that I visit most frequently, I've talked to both owners. One of them, which is the store that I used to manage, can't get Pokemon cards, period. They don't have in-store gaming anymore after the pandemic. And so their ordering of trading card games kind of dipped a bit. But they would still always keep their spinners full of booster packs so that people that come in had the option to buy them. But because they haven't been purchasing much, they don't get the option. When it's come up for the chance to order it, sorry, we're out of luck. We've already sold through the distributors, already sold everything that they have, and there's no allocation for that store. The other store that I visited is more of an actual game store. I don't think they host Pokemon events, but they have always kept kind of their orders up. But they have said that they're like, we can't get product. It's hard for us to get it. And that is actually creating an additional problem, because there's not really a set enforcement of what you can charge for booster packs. Yes, MSRP is supposed to be $4.99. And if they go to a big box store like a Target, or like I said, we've had luck finding Pokemon cards at the Dollar Tree. With those stores, they are on the shelf at their MSRP $4.99 a pack. But for local game stores where there's not an enforcement and where they can't compete with some of these stores, in order to get people in and try to make money off what they get, they're marking their booster packs up. So I know that one of the stores that I go to is charging, some of them are charging $9 and $12 for booster packs, depending on the desire for the set and what they're able to get, which is insane. If you're thinking about playing Pokemon and you've got like a 12 card booster pack and you're paying $12 for the pack, is nutty.
$1 per card. Yeah.
You also, again, and that goes back to my previous point, like Pokemon is a game that is designed primarily to be played with kids. And that was the big thing. The reason a lot of game stores stopped dropping Pokemon events is their player market is so young that they don't have cars. So you can't host evening events because they don't have any way of getting themselves to those events, or they have bedtimes. So you can't run. And we would run Magic events. They would kick off at like 7:30 at night and they would run until midnight. So you're not going to keep a bunch of 8-year-olds up to midnight on a school night. So they can't drive, they can't stay up late for events. And then they also don't have jobs. So they're reliant on birthday money or allowance money to be able to have money to spend, or to just, have a parent that throws money at whatever their kid wants. But they don't have the money to spend. So you didn't have a lot of Pokemon players that are kids that are buying booster boxes. So they can only afford to buy a pack or two. I know with my kids, that's looking at an allowance. You might be able to go buy one pack a week if you wanted to. So it's kind of one of those things that it really hurts those kids, because those kids are not going to take $5 in allowance money. You have to save for a month to be able to buy a pack of Pokemon cards. It's really not sustainable, and it's also not encouraging of your player base to stay invested.
Let's go buy Robux instead.
Yeah.
And then I know another thing that's happened. So let's say that you do eventually get your hands on these Pokemon cards and you happen to pull one of these very rare cards. I know companies like PSA, they have some very questionable grading methods. So I know that they have kind of like a post a post grading, like a post charge grading method. So if they grade your card and they work out that it's very valuable, their fee scales. Yes. So you could send in a card and it's suddenly this card is very valuable and they're charging you $1,000, and then they hold your card captive. They don't give it back to you until you pay them. So it seems like a really, really bad model where it's like, oh yeah, take my card, and if it's valuable, you're going to hold it hostage. And then some people, they might just send the card to grade, but they don't have $1,000 lying around. And what do? Does their card just stay with them, or do they just steal their card? It seems like a very strange.
And honestly, system. This is something that comic books have done for years, because comic books have the same. You can send it off to have your comic graded by CGC, and the cost to get a book graded is based on the presumed pre-graded value of the book. And so it's that point, that's why if I were to track down an Amazing Fantasy 15 first appearance of Spider-Man, and then I had just a issue number 1 of a series that just came out, it's going to cost me 5 times more to get it graded. And they still go through the same grading criteria. It's not like we bring in somebody that's got a better set of eyes and uses some extra tech to grade an old book versus a new book. But they know that those old books are the ones that have value. And so it's predatory, and that you're going to have to pay me more if you want me to grade it. So, they would do the same thing with signatures. It's one of the few industries that I've seen that I can take a comic book to a convention and have an author or artist sign it. And unless a CGC official witnesses that person signing my book, if I send it in to get graded, it will come back with writing on signature or on cover. But if I were to take a napkin up to Brad Pitt at a restaurant and he signed it, it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely a Brad Pitt signature. We can authenticate it based on the way that it looks. It's ridiculous. And I think cards do the same thing. In order for a PSA graded card to come back as a signature, if you had an artist sign it, you have to have an official witness it in order to get that signature verified as, oh, it was signed by this particular artist. Doesn't matter if we have plenty of other samples to compare it to, unless we saw it, it didn't happen, or it's not real. So those grading companies are definitely contributing to the problem too.
There's a pretty sharp fall off from the gradings as well. For example, I just know a Shadowless Charizard, which is a very rare card, first generation. A 10 grade of that is, I think it's $100,000, but a 9 suddenly drops it down to $9,000. So there's a huge discrepancy between the 9 and the 10. So it kind of is crazy, the amount of that money.
It further heightens the gambling aspect of what you're doing. Because I know my friend has told me the same thing, that he was like, unless you feel 100% confident you're going to get a PSA 10 on this card, it's not worth sending it into grade. Because the hit that you're going to take if it comes back as a 9 is not worth it. You're almost losing money sending it in to get it graded, which is bonkers.
I think that's part of the deception of this as well, because there's a lot of YouTubers basically promoting gambling. They're pulling packs and then they get a rare card. It's like the cha-ching sound effect and like the money comes up on screen. But they're not factoring in the fact that if you want to get it graded, it's going to cost so much, the time. You're probably not making any money, even if you get it graded and you eventually do sell it. Unless it's one of these super rare cards. So there's a lot of stuff in the hobby which I find very distasteful. And I prefer the crowdfunding model, and I'd like more companies to consider crowdfunding and see it as it's just a more wholesome way of getting product to customers and satisfying those needs, and creating systems which reward those who actually want to build your brand by actually playing with the thing you've created, rather than those who don't care about your brand. They're only trying to make a quick buck through some type of investment flipping, which I just think is very unwholesome and not sustainable as a business.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And I think one of the things that maybe it'll be a good pivot to start talking into the crowdfunding model, but one of the things that I think is possibly on the horizon, especially with looking at something like Pokemon, with the format, is like you guys were talking about, is the rise of having digital platforms to play these games, and the potential that has to hurt the physical market and even the local game store market. Because, if you're looking at your Pokemon cards, they're manufacturing these cards and selling them to a distributor, and it's going to, the individual local game stores. Pokemon is only getting their cut. Like it's not like there's a crazy markup when they're manufacturing those cards. The distributors are still buying those cards for Pokemon for the same cost. Well, then you have consumers that are buying these packs, and then, I just pulled this $1,500 card that they're reselling. Pokemon does not get that profit off of that card sale. So the only way that they're continuing to make money, obviously, is that I guess by continuing to create things that people want. Their hope is that people are just going to buy out inventory so that they sell out. But you're honestly leaving a ton of money on the table because of all of these secondary market sales. And so I think what's happening when you look at these digital formats is that if Pokemon makes a digital card game, and you have in-game purchases where you can buy in-game booster packs, digital booster packs, that profit is going straight to them. And so you have some of these digital platforms too that are also being fairly predatory, because to buy a digital booster pack is going to cost you like a huge amount of money, because they know people want to have it to play the game, but then they're getting all of that money that previously was kind of left off the table. So I think you have the potential to even damage or kill off your physical market by pushing a digital market where you control more of the profit margin than what was previously left only to the secondary market. So maybe that's more where crowdfunding can kind of come in as a different vehicle to deliver or create a desire for a physical card game without having a lot of this manufactured scarcity.
Predatory behavior. Completely agree. I think the whole digital push is not going to work. I tried Pokemon Pocket because they also market it as like a collectible, but also as a way to play the game. And I could not play a game unless I opened so many booster packs. Like, this is just a slot machine. You literally cannot play this game unless you play slots. And then they basically are just going to use the basically gambling techniques to get people to fork over money. So it's like, this is horrible. And this is, aimed towards children as well, which makes it even more detestable. I cannot get behind this. Just deleted the app. And I don't see digital as ever being a replacement for physical things in the trading card game space.
Yeah, because that's really where it thrives, right? Is one-on-one, face-to-face. That's why we play board games and card games in the first place.
Yeah, I like playing with my kids face-to-face. Pokemon card games being great. It's helped them read because there's a lot of text to read. It's helped them do basic math. It helps them think about strategy. So there's a lot of benefits to playing the physical game. And again, it's not connected to screens.
For sure.
So in terms of the idea of building your own audience, I think it's important maybe we talk about product catalogs, because if you're creating a certain game and you really want to try and create games for your audience that they can move from one title to another title, and there's certain things that you can design around which can attract certain audiences. So one is just IP. So I think Pokemon's like this. I think there's people who are going to buy anything that's Pokemon, whether it's a board game or a card game. And then the other one's mechanics. So an example of this would be Jamie Stegmaier. All his games sort of follow similar mechanic. Another example of this would be Modifius with their 2D20 system. They've got this mechanical system which they can then put different IPs on. And then I think those are two really, just IP and mechanics. Those are the two things you can build around. I know Andrew is doing a bit of both. He's got an IP, but also a big part of his game is co-op. So if he was to create a competitive game as his next product, it's really going to divide his audience, because there's going to be people who just like collaborative games, and he sort of developed a very collab heavy game and experience. So that's something for people to keep in mind if they are developing other games. What other tips would you guys give for someone who's thinking of crowdfunding and the legacy of their company and how to have longevity in terms of offering multiple products?
Yeah, I think for some of it would be to consider the format that you want to release your game. We have marketed TCGs, and they do come with a varying degree of success. I think if you are committed to doing a TCG model to crowdfund, I think you more than anything have to plan farther ahead than if you were producing a board game, or if you were producing even a living card game, because part of the TCG format is a desire to have more. You want to collect more. You want to see new cards come out. You want to hunt more cards. So I would almost say if you're planning to do a TCG, you almost need to be planned at least a set or two in advance, have the cards ready to go so that you can release them right after each other, that you almost have like a yearly Kickstarter for the next set, so that you can kind of keep the desire going for it. I know that we've had a couple that we've looked at where they haven't done that, and you run the risk of losing your player base because they lose interest. So it becomes hard to get their product because they're not reprinting the old sets. And they lose interest because they're waiting years to get another set of cards to collect. So I think for a TCG, someone considering a TCG, you definitely need to be planning ahead with your stuff. The other thing, like we mentioned, is like the living card game format, which I'm sure we can talk a bit more about maybe here shortly. I think the living card game format is fantastic. I personally prefer living card games to TCGs. I think the nature of it lends itself more to what I want out of a game, which is it's based more on my strategy and ability to play the game that I'll win, and less the amount of money I paid to get a deck that's good enough to win. Because you have access to everything that you need. Everybody is on an even playing field when they enter the game. It all comes down to how good are you at building a deck? How good are you at building synergies and seeing things that work? So I love that format. I think that's something that crowdfunding really has the ability to do well, because it's great to build an audience. And then maybe the last one would be a little bit of a hybrid of that. There's a card game that I've been playing with my son a lot, and it's become a real favorite of ours. There's a game called Gudnak. They just finished their second Kickstarter. They're in late pledging now. We didn't have anything to do with them, but I don't mind pushing their game. It's a really fun game. It is I guess you could say it is a living card game. If you buy a set, you have all the cards that you need to play. And then what they've done is, after they released their initial set, they released a couple expansions, and each expansion comes with new cards for each of the factions in the base game. And then this new Kickstarter they just did added a whole new faction and also cards for all the other pre-existing factions. So it's a great way to deck build and to have a strategy game. But with this second Kickstarter, so what they've done is they really invested a lot in building a Discord community and building a following. So they have a very, very active Discord community that is talking about deck building synergies, talking about cards that they like, even just side chatter. There's a ton of channels where it's just people talking about random stuff. but they've definitely built a community that's very active. They designed an app that's a really simple app, but it's an app where you can just host decks that you made. So if you built a deck, you can post it into the app. And then anyone that has the app can look at a database of all of the decks that users have submitted. And you can even like thumbs up different decks that have been made. And you can sort all of these user submitted decks by popularity. So if you're looking to try something that a lot of people say they tend to like, whether it's fun or it's good, you can do that. So I think that's a really cool facet to keep people engaged. And so what they ended up doing then is kind of, because they have a following already, this newest one, they decided to release some booster packs. So you could get a box that is booster packs. However, they are purely cosmetic cards. It is marked as, we just want people to kind of trade with each other through the Discord channel and have the opportunity to bling out your decks. And I think it's kind of cool with their game because you only play with a 20 card deck. You can only have one of each copy of a card in a deck. So it's really easy to hunt for. I just want a different art version of this one. And it's allowed them, they did some partnerships with like Penny Arcade and a couple other really popular illustrators just to create variants of cards. So it's purely cosmetic. I know that's one of the things that we even recommend to people when they do stretch goals, is that a lot of your stretch goals are not gameplay exclusive, but are more of cosmetic changes so that your super fans have a way to bling their stuff out if they want to. But for someone that just casually wants to get into it, they don't have to have it. And so I think that's what this company has chosen to do, is now that they have put forth the effort to build a really big community, they're able to kind of keep it going by now offering something that players can buy if they want to, that is purely cosmetic, but is a neat way for the community to still engage, because they built a full trading channel on their Discord server so that people can pop in, hey, I picked up a copy of this card. Does anyone have this one? And people are just swapping stuff all the time. And maybe the benefit for them is it's not something that is, you don't necessarily have, it's not like it's so big that you've got millions and millions of people playing and there's a high markup in the secondary market. The cards aren't being sold on TCG Player. It's just amongst players. Maybe that's another hurdle if you ever were to explode an IP. But I think for one that's kind of done the work to build a community, it's a really cool way to keep people engaged with your product and it not be predatory.
Yeah, I think that sounds like they're doing a great job. We'll make sure to include a link in the show notes for people to check that out. Donnie, what is the state of Lacana, the Disney's trading card game? Has that kind of slowly dwindled, or is it thriving? Whereabouts is that in the kind of trading card game scene?
As someone who doesn't play Lorcana or really follow it, I'm not sure.
Okay, I thought that you were making it.
No. We kind of looked into it a little bit. I mean, from what I can see, they seem to be doing okay. I mean, they're still relatively new when it comes to trading card games. But it's interesting even bringing that up, because one of the things I was thinking about was the best thing Magic the Gathering did was taking on IPs for the Universes Beyond stuff. Because if you remember, if you're looking at the list of collectible card games and such, a lot of them were based on IPs. So there was even a Nightmare Before Christmas trading card game at some point. And what's kind of interesting is when those card games came out, so for Nightmare Before Christmas is a prime example, there was one movie, they couldn't go indefinitely, right? So there was going to be a natural end to that line. And I think there was only maybe one box anyway. So you can kind of buy into that. And I noticed that it's okay, it was a way for them to we're going to build a game around these cards that people can collect and play a game. But really what they want is more of the thing they love, right? People who love Nightmare Before Christmas, that game isn't targeting Magic the Gathering players. They're targeting people who like Nightmare Before Christmas, right? So that's one thing I noticed was okay, a lot of these trading card games that fizzle out, not all of them, they were IPs that was okay, we want to make something for the fans out there. So Magic taking on IPs, saying, hey, we have an established system. Let's just make a deal with IPs here. Because, I mean, Games Workshop has played around with card games a lot of different times. And so it's like, okay, giving them 40K, it's like, okay, Magic is a game that a lot of people know, kind of like D&D to role-playing games, right? Most people know how to play Magic that have played TCGs. So let's throw 40K on there. So Disney and Ravensburger doing Lorcana, kind of like Fantasy Flight doing Star Wars Unlimited. It's like, okay, we're using IPs that people know. And the Disney one is, I mean, first off, it's a beautiful game. Like having all new art with it, it's a great looking game. And it's like, okay, so if nothing else, people are seeing the characters they love in a new way, in a way that they haven't really seen before. So I think a lot of that collecting is that direction, more of like, okay, I just want more of these characters. Like, oh, what are my favorite Disney characters? Like, okay, I love Treasure Planet. They have a whole line of all the characters from Treasure Planet or Atlantis or whatever that are kind of these cult classic movies now. So we're seeing a lot of that. So like One Piece is actually a really big card game that is not one of the big three that has become really popular, but not because necessarily of the gameplay, but because of One Piece, because people love that IP. So I think that's what you're going to see, and I think that's where people have been using kind of TCG, those models with those IPs, like a living card game, where it kind of has a natural end to it. So the Lord of the Rings living card game, kind of to bridge that gap, they had a natural end point where it's like, okay, we could probably keep milking this for all it's worth, making different variants of each card, but it kind of came to a natural end point. But I mean, the card base for that game is still huge, and I think it's at least it was at some point like the biggest selling living card game. It was like that, and I think Arkham Horror, like those are the two like big living card game sellers, at least from Fantasy Flight side. But those kind of have a natural progression or like a natural end. It's like, okay, eventually we'll have a big enough card base, and you just have this amazing game to play. That costs you a fraction of, these other games that just they have this cycle, right, of just keep regurgitating cards. How many Charizards are there in Pokemon right now? Like, how many times can you have a Charizard or, whatever? It's like, but they do it because it sells, right? It's like, what does this Charizard do different? Oh, it's a slightly different or what have you. We'll do a team up with Brixton. It's like, okay, now there's 2 Pokemon on a card, so I know you asked me about Lorcana, but it just kind of led into I think Lorcana may have a natural progression. It might have a natural end, but there will be a big game there that people that have the cards can still play. But I think it goes back into that collecting. It's like once a TCG ends and they've kind of marketed it as like, oh, we're just going to keep making new cards. Once it ends, people kind of get this idea of like, well, what's the new thing then? And I think that's where building in an LCG model or like a board game or card game model, it's like you kind of have this built in. It's like, okay, eventually this is going to end and we just have this big card base. Dominion is a great example of that, right? They have this huge card base. It's like they could stop whenever. They're still making them, from what I know. I don't know if they've officially canceled Dominion or not. But you get to a point where you have a card base where it's like, okay, we have a solid game here that you can just pull cards and play. And Magic has an unofficial of that as well. As they have their cube where you can build in a bunch of different cards and you just play from that cube where you make a new deck every time. I think you draft from the cube is how it plays. I was looking into it a little bit. So I think those are kind of 2 different things when it comes to trading card games. Like there's a way we think about it and there's a way it can be presented. And I think that's where like the LCG model and then even the kickstarting model comes in. It's like it's how you present it and how it's perceived. So
yeah, I also think the diving into IPs is a double-edged sword because we'll include a link in the show notes of a YouTube video which actually I think sparked this conversation. And this particular individual was arguing that the success and popularity of Final Fantasy and Magic the Gathering is actually going to harm the IP of Magic the Gathering because what it's signaled to the company is that this IP is so popular that there's going to be other IPs, and Magic the Gathering is now really just becoming a vehicle to promote pop culture, kind of different audiences. And their fear was that the actual game and the IP, the world, and the lore of Magic the Gathering is going to go on the back burner because there's just other IPs which are far more popular and successful. I think Final Fantasy has been the highest grossing line of all time, so it's kind of blown everything else out of water. It hasn't really given them much of a motivation to go back to kind of the OG Magic the Gathering. I'm sure their company might be thinking maybe there's another IP out there that we can tap into.
Sure.
Yeah, well, the next one they're doing is Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah,
that's their next
huge.
IP.
Yeah. I think I do think that point that the guy makes is definitely one of those things that becomes a risk, that if you are making all your money off of pulling in an IP, that your main core game suffers. I think the only way, and again, maybe you have to kind of fight down some corporate greed for part of it, but I do think you have to kind of consider the community as a whole. And that's what I guess I would say, like Lego does a pretty solid job with this, with their Star Wars IP. When Lego does their Star Wars sets, they always release batches of new sets that there's always like they kind of follow a set of price models. So there's almost always going to be like a couple $9.99 sets, and then there'll be like a $29.99 set, and then they'll have one that's a little bit bigger. And then with Star Wars, I think it's 3 times a year, maybe it's only 2. They have what are called like their UCS sets, like their Ultimate Collector sets, and that's like the big like 4,000 piece Millennium Falcon or some of these other ones, and those are geared more towards collectors. They're big sellers. They sell out on most of those sets if you don't order them like that opening weekend. But they are still kind of keeping in mind that their brand is still about kids and building. And so they have a commitment to release products at each price point so that everyone kind of has a way to dive in and get a part of it and still feel like they're getting the Lego experience and even getting to enjoy some of those IPs. So I know for a game like Magic, it is one of those things that I think it would be easy if you're cranking out a set like Final Fantasy and you're a big enough company that you can afford to keep buying IPs. I definitely see the allure of why not just keep doing that, and can see that killing things off. One, because it makes those IP releases less, I think they're less appealing if they come out all the time, because then people will disregard certain sets and be like, well, if I know that they're going to do 10 IP releases this year, I'm going to pass on this one because I want to buy the next one. You kind of deaden the appeal. So I feel like the more successful model would be to limit your IP releases. If you only do like maybe 2 or 3 or 1 a quarter with your IP releases, that forces you to still invest in the base game because they still have to have a trickle down of effects. So, yeah, maybe it's smaller number than that. I think Pokemon releases a new set every 2 months. Magic, I think, is similar. I think every 2 months is a new Magic set. So you're getting like 6 sets a year. If you have 6 sets a year and then you choose to release like 1 or 2 IP sets on top of that, it's at least still feeding the community as a whole. So the people that want to collect or want these special IP sets can buy them. But those that have been more of your stalwarts that just enjoy playing the game, they like the lore of Magic, they're constantly getting a feed of new stuff to play with. Because ultimately, they're the ones that are going to keep your game going the longest. Because the percentage of people that are into Magic and are into like Final Fantasy, that's like 2 different groups. You can't purely cater to people that are into Final Fantasy because not all those people care about playing a TCG. But if you have a ton of these TCG players and then you know what they like, it's kind of those IPs kind of become a snack almost. Like it's something that I can indulge in if I want to. I can include those cards in my sets if I want to, but you're still feeling cared for and getting the meat of these regular sets that are still tied to the core lore. So, I mean, that's, what do I know? I mean, I'm not running a multi-million-dollar business, so I can't take my word for it. But at least from a consumer standpoint, I feel like that's the one thing you'd have to keep in mind to keep from killing off your brand.
Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground. And if you are producing a card game, a living card game, even a trading card game, and you're seeking to go to crowdfunding to raise the funds to produce that, then make sure to check us out at crowdfundingnerds.com. I'm going to hand it over to Robot Richard to sign us out.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's episode of Crowdfunding Nerds. For more resources, articles, and to listen to past podcasts, please visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And if you have a crowdfunding question, we also have a page on our site where you can send a message directly to us. Please visit crowdfundingnerds.com/question. And if your question is a great question, we may include it in a future podcast. Thank you all again for listening to this week's episode, and we'll see you next week. Stay nerdy.
Hey, Crowdfunding Nerds, it's Andrew Lowen, and I wanted to introduce you guys to the Crowdfunding Nerds Academy. If you don't know, we have a do-it-yourself course system that will teach you how to build, excite, and prepare a crowd to fund you on your launch day, and that is our goal. I have used these systems to help raise over $30 million for tabletop campaigns, over 200 tabletop crowdfunding campaigns since 2019. I've generated over $100 million through e-commerce sales using these processes. These courses teach you how to replicate our results. They're made for the small creator. Over 150 of those people were first-time creators. These courses contain hundreds of hours of podcast discussions and tons of details that are almost impossible to find on the internet. And they have been distilled into concentrated courses that you can absorb quickly. They are designed to generate results. We hold nothing back. Visit crowdfundingnerds.com/academy to learn more, or just Google search Crowdfunding Nerds Academy.